Hi, welcome to this part of my guide and review featuring the Mythic Game Master Emulator, 2nd edition. If you haven't seen the other parts of my guide and review, please check out the playlist in the description below. This time we are going to talk about sins. Fate questions and random events cover almost anything you could think to ask about in an adventure and anything unexpected that might be thrown your way. But before you can get to playing, there's one more thing you need to consider: structure. Without a framework to connect one part of the narrative to the next, all those questions and events aren't much more than a jumble of details. In a typical social role-playing scenario, the Game Master maintains this structure implicitly, but solo play requires something more concrete. Mythic uses a simple scene structure that's mostly there to help you keep track of where your adventure is going, so you are less likely to get lost in the weeds. Now, this section of the book gives you everything you need to run exciting and effective Mythic adventures, but there's more to discover. Once you've gotten the hang of the basics, you can head to the Variations chapter for additional rules on the mechanics we've covered in other parts of this book, as well as strategies for dealing with issues you may encounter along the way. It's important to consider sins as units of time that you use to identify what's going on and who is involved. Like in a typical traditional social role-playing scenario, the characters enter a room and deal with what's inside. They have a surprise encounter in a forest perhaps, or maybe they visit a town to procure new equipment. Something specific happens with certain characters in a finite amount of time, and then you move on. You are forming scenes. Mythic adventures work the same, but the scene structure is explicit instead of implicit. This makes it easier to keep track of everything as you go. Let's talk about the elements of a scene. You have lists, which are a collection of adventure goals to pursue and characters to interact with. You also have the scene structure. This is the way you determine the beginning and end of a scene. Besides the first scene, there are 3 kinds of scenes: expected, altered, and interrupt. Then you have playing, the content of a scene, everything that happens and what your player characters do in response. This is where the adventure takes place. Then we have bookkeeping. This is about updating lists and the chaos factor, usually at the end of a scene. If you are recording your adventure in some way, this is also a good time to update that record. Let's talk about preparing lists. Before you begin an adventure, you need to get your adventure lists ready. You can find the adventure lists sheet in the random events chapter at the back of this book. Often you will start with a fresh, empty set of lists, but you can populate your lists with any elements you'd like to begin the adventure with. There are many reasons you might do this. Maybe you already have some ideas, like interesting characters to encounter or a starting goal to pursue. Or maybe this adventure is part of an ongoing campaign, and you want to add characters and threats from previous adventures. Adding elements to your lists before you begin is a good way to seed your adventure with ideas. Mythic will take these ideas and weave them into the narrative as you play, guiding you towards the experience you want. And this concludes this part of the guide and review. In the next part, we are going to talk about threats and characters lists. As you can see, scenes are very easy to understand. You have your lists containing characters and story threats. You are going to be using these elements as you play within the scene structure, and you are going to be keeping track of things such as the chaos factor, updating lists, and recording things in a journal perhaps, or as a sound recording or video clip or whatever you like. Thank you for watching this part of the guide and review, and thank you for your likes and your comments. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that are going the extra mile to support the channel. If anyone else wishes to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.